Where is InsurTech headed next? This is where indie agents own the answer. Welcome to the Vertifor Insurance Podcast. Let's go. Welcome back to the Vertifor Insurance Podcast, everybody. Really pumped to have you guys on for this week's episode. We have a very special guest in the studio, aka via Zoom this week. He's actually someone that I had the pleasure of working for a number of years and now get to spend some time digging into the entirety of his career, which it's going to be a lot to fit into this little chunk here. But we're going to do our best, and it feels a little bit full circle. So this guy is somebody who has been a leader in the insurance industry. He has done... I'm going to tell you a little bit about him after he introduces himself, and honestly, the words don't do themselves justice. I think there's been a lot of wins and moments that you really can't fit onto a piece of paper, and I'm very excited to have him on and for him to share what he's accomplished and what he's brought to the industry over the past, 4 decades is crazy. So, Bob Rusbuldt, how are you?
Sid, we miss you at the Big I, but you stayed in the family, so that's the good news. But thank you for having me, and you must have been talking about somebody else in that intro, because I couldn't have done all that over 4 decades.
That's what I'm saying. You're an impressive guy, and I'm honored to have you on. So I'd love to introduce you to those, and I know many know you, but as we talked about before, people have short memories, or else we wouldn't have second kids. So let's take a look back for a sec at what you've accomplished. Bob is the CEO of the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America. He has actually been a part of the organization for 37 years and led the team for 23 in total. He actually joined in 1986 and led the Government Affairs Department, and then ultimately was named CEO in 2001. He has overseen many major Big I initiatives, including the inception of Big I Markets, which is a market access program for agent members, the formation of BRIC, a reinsurance company, and InsurBank, that's a bank catering to independent insurance agency needs, the implementation of a marketing brand for members, Trusted Choice. That brings back some memories. Whew. And the consumer-facing agent locator and company TrustedChoice.com. Also really good memories. Led the creation of Big I Hires, a national hiring resource for the independent agency channel, and the establishment of the Trusted Choice Disaster Relief Fund and COVID-19 Relief Fund for member agencies in need. He was named a, quote, top 25 living legend in insurance by Property Casualty 360, and earlier this year he was actually recognized, I guess this is 2022, Whew, I can't believe it's 2023 already. He was recognized last year by Insurance Business Magazine among the world's top insurance leaders on its Global 100 list. That is an impressive list, sir. That is an impressive list. I do want to share my 2 memories of you, and that's one was actually working with Sue Nestor. This was when I was 23 years old, didn't know really even how to spell insurance at this point, and I remember walking into your office when you and Chip were filming the very first TrustedChoice.com video announcing the program and the project. And I remember walking into your office thinking, whoa, I'm in the office of the CEO. I've made it. That was probably my first memory. And the second one that really stood out to me was when Trusted Choice sponsored the Lacrosse World Championship. And for those of you guys who don't know, man, that was an incredible opportunity, because I believe that their sponsor had actually dropped out at the last minute due to unforeseen reasons and circumstances, and we had enough connections that we were able to get a shoe in, and we're able to expose the Trusted Choice brand to people from all over the country and all over the world. And it was the perfect demographic as well with, that lacrosse, with the lacrosse sport. So it was really cool to be there. But I remember being in the hotel and we were about to go to dinner. And it was just you and I. I walked up and you were sitting there going through email, and you took the time to ask how I was, ask about the, the marketing initiatives that we had at play at the championships. And then we started talking about martinis, and I found out that your favorite martini is a dirty martini with extra olive juice. And I was like, okay, he gets a check in my book. So I've enjoyed, I remember very much enjoying the time spent with you. And it's really nice to have you on the podcast today.
Your memory is awesome, obviously. But yeah, how cool was that World Lacrosse Championship in Denver that we were the lead sponsor of? That was one of the cooler things we've done, and you were a major part of that. Behind the scenes was invaluable, and you were getting me from one TV interview to a studio to on the field, and it was a really neat experience for Trusted Choice and for independent agents, literally in the United States, and for brokers around the world, because it really was worldwide. But 4 decades is a long time, Sid. And there's a lot that we could talk about. There's a lot I'd like to forget, actually, as well. But starting in 1986 and right up to today, a lot has transpired, not just in the independent agency universe, but in our country and in the world. When I started, the internet didn't exist at the Big I until Al Gore invented it, and then we were all set to go. But using fax machines and Wang data processors and all of that was what was in vogue when I started at the Big I. And look at where we are today with the InsurTech explosion and technology, oozing all around us. It's two radically different universes. But the great thing about the independent agency system in the Big I is we adapt and we evolve. And that's why independent agents are where they are today. From the first independent agent in the 1700s in South Carolina to where we are today with 40,000 agencies in the United States. So I'm proud to have been a part of the independent agency system and the Big I. It's been an honor to lead this association and work with great people like you.
I appreciate that. We'll definitely try to carry the torch as best we can. But I want to take a look back for a sec. And before we dig into, I'm going to start actually in 1986, before the internet was born. Before I was born, actually.
Okay, now you're rubbing it in.
I'm kidding. So, the association, my dad's an insurance agent, and the association was always a very meaningful part of his career. It represented this ability for small business owners to feel like they were as powerful as a unified collective, but still give them the opportunity to be independent and sort of make their own choices and be their own leaders in the way that they wanted, as opposed to having to be a part of one company, right? To have that unified collective. And it really is the glue that sort of holds the industry together in a way that really represents that power and leverage. But looking back at 1986, I'm curious, when you stepped into this organization that plays such a meaningful part in the insurance industry, what were some of the things that were happening, going on, any challenges that you were facing when you were leading that government team? I know today technology is a huge challenge, but it hasn't always been technology, right? It really hasn't. And I did actually Google things that were happening in 1986, just so we could give people a sense of, what else was going on in the world. In 1986, Soviet nuclear reactor at Chernobyl actually exploded on April 26th. That was a huge moment for society. There was a lot that humanity was dealing with. The Oprah Winfrey Show debuted nationally. The space shuttle Challenger disintegrated. That was a massive blow, I think, as well to our race against Russia. And we had mad cow disease as well. So I think 1986 was a tough year. It was a tough year for a lot of reasons. What was happening in the insurance space?
It's interesting. I had left the American Insurance Association, so I worked on the company side before I came to the agent broker side.
Okay.
And AIA, of course, now has merged with APCIA, the new entity on the company side. But the number one issue for agents and brokers at that time was the literal war we were in with the banking industry. The banking industry wanted to be in the agent distribution space. They were trying to buy agencies. They were looking for legal loopholes and legislative loopholes to try to really get into our space. We were in a major war with them. We ultimately carved out a deal with them, a compromise on Capitol Hill in the early 1990s in the Gramm-Leach-Bliley law, which is still the law today. We were locked in a room. I was literally locked in a room with banking executives to cut a deal. Congressman Mike Oxley was the leader of that with Chairman Bliley. And lo and behold, we cut a deal and the 100 Years' War was over with the banking industry. That was one of the top legislative issues at that time in the late 1980s, early 1990s. So there are other things that were big at that time. The whole Superfund issue, all of the toxic waste areas around the country, and the whole liability issue for the insurance industry on that was a big issue that we were dealing with at the time. And then we had the availability, affordability crisis of the late 80s, early 90s, where litigation was out of control and people were ripping diving boards out of their backyard swimming pools because insurance companies wouldn't write any homeowners insurance. Anything that had any kind of risk to it was not being written, and we had a availability, affordability crisis led to some risk retention legislation that still is in existence today. So there were a lot of insurance-specific challenges in the late 80s, early 90s that we dealt with. But it wasn't all gloom and doom, right? The Big I was a PGA Tour sponsor of the independent insurance agent Houston Open for 5 years in Houston, Texas. And that was a fun thing to do. It was a big deal. I went every year, played in the Pro-Am. ABC TV was the network that covered our tournament. It then became the Shell Houston Open, and today it has a different sponsor. So there were some exciting things going on. Back then, as you said, challenges. Chernobyl. If anybody hasn't watched the HBO series on Chernobyl, watch it. It's mind-boggling what happened back in that era. So yeah, it was a big move moving from the company side to the agent broker side, but it was the best move I ever made. And I still get to work with all my friends on the carrier side. And the agent broker side is super exciting, and I'm glad I did it.
So when I think about your journey, obviously you didn't start at the Big I and finish at the Big I. You had a history of, your career had a history before the Big I. Why, as you were working, your way up, and what was that moment you decided to make a commitment to the Big I and say, this is the organization that I want to really invest in? What was going through your head in those years?
Yeah, lobbying for the Big I in government affairs was incredible because of the resources and the tools and the assets that we had. Mm-hmm. We had one of the largest PACs for the small business community in Washington, D.C., one of the largest PACs in the insurance industry. That gives you access on Capitol Hill. We have a grassroots network, which made us very powerful with with members of Congress. And, we had a great coalition with our company partners and others. And if government affairs was your thing, your shtick, it was one of the best places to be in Washington, D.C. So I've always had a political Jones, political science major in undergraduate school, history major, and then a master's degree in political science. So it's always what I think I was born to do, although I did want to be a fighter pilot or an NBA player for a while, but quickly those fell by the wayside. But it was a great place to be if that's what you wanted to do in the government affairs realm. Mm-hmm. My son now works for the National Association of Realtors, doing the same thing, following the old man's footsteps. And he is in a great place, just as I was with the Big I. So there's good places to lobby and some places that don't have the same resources, assets, and advantages that an entity like the Big I has.
I can hear in your answer that you saw a lot of opportunity at the Big I, but I do think there's something about, and I just want to call it out because this is that moment where I get to talk about you as a person, not just what you've done, but it takes a special person to not only see the opportunity, but to want to walk through that door too, right? I mean, you knew that there would be wins, but you have to be able to accept the challenges and the risks that are going to come with that commitment. And I think that's a noble thing to do in that moment. I think there's a lot of people that shy away from that commitment or that decision because it feels too much. It's overwhelming. I mean, when you look back, did you feel any of those things, or was it just it couldn't have been all rainbows? Like, I can't believe it's all rainbows and blue skies, right? I mean, you must have said to yourself, like, I'm willing to accept both sides of this. I'm willing to dig in.
No doubt about it. It's not all rainbows. No job, no career path is all rainbows. If there is one, I'd like to see it. Whether you're going to be a professional athlete or what you're doing, there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of challenges. There's injuries along the way. It's the same thing in the business world, right? I mean, you're going to pull a ligament here or there and have some challenges, and you have to rehab and get back on the field and go full speed ahead. So I'm no different than anybody else. Your career path, you've gone in a couple different directions and ended up with an incredible Big I partner at Vertifor. I'm very proud of what you've done as well. Sometimes I feel a little bit like Johnny Appleseed. I produced literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have left the Big I at various points in time, from the Peter Van Artrix that formed his own company, to Phil Anderson in the government affairs, who worked for Vice President Dan Quayle and has a wildly successful firm in Washington, D.C., to Tim McCone, who's head of government affairs for AT&T Corporation. And the list is just goes on and on and on. So I'm very, I take a lot of satisfaction in watching people's careers progress that started at the Big I. And you're just one example of that. But having said all of that, yes, there were challenges along the way. I got a phone call one night and was made CEO. I had no advance warning that was really going to take place. And it was literally just a couple of months before 9/11 hit in 2001. Mm-hmm. And I'm made CEO, and a couple months later, our country is under attack, and I'm in the Oval Office with the President of the United States, talking about insurance issues and whether the industry was going to invoke a war exclusion for the World Trade Center and all of the damage that had been wreaked by the terrorists. So, you talk about baptism by fire, or, put a fire hose to the mouth. That was it when I was made CEO. It was a very, very challenging, but also exciting time. And I wouldn't have changed a thing looking back on it.
How did you, in those moments, keep that optimism and that idealism, right? I mean, I think that's what makes a true leader, is in the darkest moments when nobody else can see the light at the end of the tunnel. No one else can see. Everyone just sees, oh my gosh, carriers are going to go out of business. who's going to, pay for the damage? How are we going to help all these people? And it just feels overwhelming, right? It feels like too big of a challenge to wrap your hands around. How did you as a leader move through those moments and get to the other side and get the organization to the other side?
Well, nobody wants to follow a pessimist. If it's all gloom and, hey, follow me, it's all gloom and doom. No, you have to be an optimist. All good leaders have to be an optimist, but you have to be a realist as well. Employees know when a leader is snowing them, and you can't do that. But you also have to show them there is light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what the challenge is for a company or an association. They want to see a path to success. And that's what I always try to do is show our members all over the United States and internationally, and the employees of the Big I, our carrier partners, you have to show them a path to success. How can we generate more business for independent agents and our carrier partners? How can we utilize technology in ways that will make agencies more efficient and effective? How can we recruit more talent to the industry? Here's a path to do it with Big I hires. Here's how to help on technology with the Agents Council for Technology. You have to show answers and optimism, and you have to be realistic in both of those. So I think it's a waste of energy to be a pessimist. We all know pessimists in our lives, and frankly, I think most of the time they're a little lonely. Because nobody wants to be around a pessimist.
Yeah, that's the truth. Going back to your Johnny Appleseed analogy, which I think is fitting, I remember when working at the Big I, you were pioneering some things that, especially with Trusted Choice and trustedchoice.com, I don't think you were ever scared to say, you know what, let's try this. Absolutely, we're going to be a realist about it, and we're going to think through it and be intentional. But the risk isn't going to hold us back from trying it. We have to do something, and I'm not going to sit in a closet and say, well, we'll just keep doing things the way that we've been doing them. I think you really pioneered, even with supporting trustedchoice.com and how everything was created and put together. There was a lot of thought and intention behind those movements that I don't think people really appreciate.
Yeah, those are two examples. The Big I is a very complex entity. We're sort of like the AARP of the insurance industry. It's not just dues in and dues out. We own a bank with Bill Berkeley. We own a reinsurance company. We own a technology company with some company partners, trustedchoice.com. We manufacture products. We were the first and only association that was a bank holding company regulated by the Federal Reserve Board. Never happened before, and there's never been one since then. That is radical, having an association regulated by the Federal Reserve Board and us starting and owning a bank. So we have taken chances to benefit our members, and we are not looking at the status quo. We know we have to evolve. We know we have to be there for our members. We have to do things for our members that they can't do for themselves. That's what associations are all about. And when we formed a bank, people thought we were crazy. And the bank is profitable today, is providing financing for Big I members and independent agents and brokers around the United States. Very successful bank. And you mentioned Trusted Choice and trustedchoice.com. One of the things we talked about years ago in our board and executive committee was, State Farm has a brand, but they're not independent. They don't offer customization. They don't offer choice. They don't offer all the things and advantages that independent agents and brokers do. But they had one thing that we didn't have, a big brand, period. We're better than them, but consumers don't know it. And that was the genesis of launching Trusted Choice, saying we need a co-brand, a national co-brand, not a brand, a co-brand, to supplement and augment the local agency's brand. So the Bob Rusbuldt agency at the local level, we wanted the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, the Intel Inside. I don't know what Intel Inside means, but I know it's good and I want it. Trusted choice and brands are to create that instantaneous nanosecond impression in the mind of a consumer that is the good housekeeping seal of approval. And that's what we've tried to do with a co-brand of trusted choice. You don't have to know what it all means, but you just have to know it's good. Mm-hmm. And so working with our company, Trusted Choice Partners, we took a chance on creating this co-brand. It eventually led to the formation, as you know, your former employer, trustedchoice.com, which is going gangbusters. It's profitable. We're generating tons of business. We've had over 8 million consumers go to trustedchoice.com to find a Trusted Choice independent insurance agent. It's growing by leaps and bounds, the SEO work they're doing. And I could go on and on about both Trusted Choice and trustedchoice.com. But at the time, everybody thinks you might be a little crazy, right, Sid? I mean, they're going, well, why do I need a co-brand? Mm-hmm. I'm the Sidney Rowe agency. Everybody mm-hmm. knows me in my local town. Well, mm-hmm. don't you want to write more business in your town and outside your town? So looking back on it, it was the right thing to do. And our members are better for it.
And I think, too, there's always conversation that happens, and it's healthy to have people say, well, why, or I disagree, or whatever the conversation might be. But for a minute, I would ask anybody to imagine a world without the big I. Whatever you think about different moves or different projects or your opinion, imagine a world without the big I. That's a scary place to me, because I go back to the meaningfulness that my family's agency, the meaningfulness of the organization to my family's agency, and it really was a beacon of hope, right? Hey, here's a place where we can all come together, and maybe there are decisions made. We live in a democracy where decisions are made that we don't agree with every day. But I would much rather live in this world than any other world. So I always come back to that at the end of the day. And, I think cherry on top is we've seen the success of a lot of the projects over the long term, come to fruition, which is really cool to see.
Well, Sidney, I'm going to make what may seem to the uninformed a profound declaration, but it is not hyperbole. Mm-hmm. Without the big I, there would be no such thing as independent agents and brokers today. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. There'd only be captive mm-hmm. agents. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. Because we won super important litigation in the mm-hmm. early 1900s called the Yonkers case, which established legally, mm-hmm. And in subsequent work we did with carriers, the independent agency system as we know it today. If the big I had not stepped in, raised money, and litigated that case, every agent today in the United States would be captive working for one insurance company. There'd be no such thing as the independent agency system. What makes us unique in the world is that we own our book of business. We own our expirations. We own the information. And if you look at all the other countries around the world, there are brokers. They represent more than one market, but they don't own their book of business. The carriers, whoever they write it for, owns the expirations, owns the book of business. There's no such thing as a book roll in Japan. So we are very unique in the world, and it's because of the big I. Yep. So if your listeners don't know one other thing, there'd be no independent agency system as we know it today without the big I, and that's not an exaggeration.
Mm-hmm. That's very well said. I don't think I could top that. So let me ask this: as you look back over the last 37 years, we talked a little bit about when you first joined the organization, when you became the CEO and really took ownership over the vision and the future of the organization. What were some of the biggest challenges that you remember looking back over the past 37 years? I mean, the fact that we were at war with the banking industry, as you were saying that, I just thought, gosh, the independent insurance agent we have tough skin, man. We have tough skin to be able to get through the roadblocks that just keep arising. And, I know we've got technology today, but was there anything else in that span that you remember and can reflect on to say, we faced that and we got through it, and we got to the other side of it, and here's how we did it?
Yeah, when I became CEO in 2001, as I said, it was right before 9/11 hit, and I was driving to the office and listening to the radio and saw smoke coming from the Pentagon. And I was trying to get to our Capitol Hill office. I had to divert to our Alexandria national headquarters office, and of course, the rest is history, so to speak. But I had to make some quick decisions, both for the association. Made a lot of phone calls to company carrier partners and other associations, and of course, it ended up with a meeting in the White House with President Bush. So that was something we were dealing with right out of the box. If anybody listening remembers traveling right after 9/11 in 2001, what a disaster. Nobody knew what was going on. Of course, it led to TSA many years later. But travel changed overnight, and I have to travel every week. And so there are a lot of changes that were taking place in the country and in the world, let alone in the independent agent space. Regarding the independent agency system in the 2000s, we went through a lot of evolution. Obviously, the word automation is an old term now. You got to be automated. You've got to have Vertifor, you've got to have an agency management system, blah, blah, blah. Well, nobody talks like that anymore, obviously. They're talking about a whole host of other things that you need in the agency. And so really, if you look at the advent of technology in the 2000 timeframe, and the creation of the Agents Council of Technology with Jeff Yates, which I created with Jeff in 2001. And that was really the genesis of us really putting a spotlight and resources on the technology needs of independent agencies. And, we were looking at, how to do real-time download and the whole SEMSI issue was now taking on a new meaning in the industry. So technology was really something right out of the box when I was CEO that we concentrated heavily on. And I was fortunate that Jeff Yates, my predecessor, said yes, that he would do it and come out of retirement and lead the Agents Council for Technology. And, then we had Ron Berg, and of course now we have Chris Klein doing that, which we hired from Westfield. So I could spend hours talking about technology evolution and the things that we've done for independent agents, but you don't have enough time.
That's fair. That's fair. And I guess too, I look at, the companies that have come, that have either become technology companies or have started as technology companies. I think of State Farm or Progressive, Nationwide, or even Lemonade, which is an insurance technology company right out of the gate. All of them sell through independent insurance agents. All of them, even the ones that said, we'll play it safe and not go through an agent. We think we're tough cookie and we can handle distribution and acquisition ourselves. End up coming back around and saying, well, maybe we were wrong about that. And hopefully by the time this podcast is published, you're going to actually hear another announcement of another carrier that is going to be selling through agents as well. So I guess I look back and I think when I first started, when I was working for you, and this was when I was 23 years old, all I heard was the doom and gloom messaging. This is going to kill the agent. I didn't have any perspective on the history of what the association had been through, what the industry had been through. And in that moment in time, I had a very fear-based reaction to, wow, what if we do lose? And it just sent me on this mission to say, shout it from the mountaintops, you guys got to, step up your game and modernize. And while I think that's true, I also think there's something foundational. There's something deep about who an independent insurance agent is and how they interact in society And, when properly powered, I believe can resist a lot of challenge. And I think we've seen that. I mean, that's why one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you today is because you've seen the industry go through all those things. And that in and of itself, I think when you get into that situation again, it's, oh, okay, here it's technology, right? As a 23-year-old, I didn't have that perspective. You could step into that world and say, hey, we've been through this before, we're going to make it out the other side, right? So
you're absolutely right. And, we hear all the doom and gloom from the conning and companies throughout history, all of these entities coming out and saying the independent agent is going the way of the buggy whip manufacturer, the milkman, the candlestick maker, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. They've been wrong for 40 years. They're still wrong. I gave a speech to the Allstate executives at the McDonald's Center in Chicago 25 years ago. I don't remember the exact date. Ed Liddy was the CEO of Allstate, and he invited me to address their leaders on insurance distribution and the future of insurance distribution. I told Allstate at that time that the captive agent was doomed. Mm-hmm. There were only going to be two channels that would survive. It would be independent agents and direct. Mm-hmm. That the captive agent model could not survive going forward. And after the speech, Ed came up and said, that was interesting, Bob. He goes, you do know where you are, right? I said, yeah, that's why I gave the speech here. And of course, we've seen Nationwide, we've seen Liberty, we've seen company after company jettison the captive system and adopt the independent agent model. So that trend is going to continue. The last man standing really is State Farm, mm-hmm. Where they're totally exclusive captive agents. And I think it's just a matter of time before they see the light and join our side.
Yeah, hey, I'm with you on that. I'll take that bet. So let me ask the big question. After all this time, I mean, how can you retire? Where are you going? Why now? I guess I'm curious.
37 years is a long time, any place.
Yeah.
I have a grandkid now, and that's a life changer. But it's time to do other things. I am going to continue consulting. I've already signed a contract with the Big I, so I'll continue consulting for the Big I. I'll continue as chairman of the board of TrustedChoice.com. I serve on some other boards. I serve on the Accord board. I serve on the InsureBank board. I'll continue on that. There's a couple other boards I'll be on. I'll be consulting for a couple other entities. I'm still going to be heavily involved in the industry. You can't get rid of me that quickly, Sid. But it's time for somebody else to lead, and Charles Symington's going to do a great job. He's worked for me for about 18 years now. He knows the association, he knows our members, and he'll be a great leader for the association with a great background. So
wonderful. Well, it's hard to see you go. I think that there's a lot that you've invested into the industry, and I think a lot of people feel, you've been that guy that hey, it's the Big I and Bob, and he's leading the team, and Charles, and I know everybody else is there, but I think when you have a core team member, when you've got the leader, the CEO stepping away, it's a transition. It's a change, it's a shift that the industry has to go through. So I guess I'm glad to hear that you're not, going cold turkey on us and going to some remote cabin in the mountains where we'll never see or hear from you again. It's nice to know that we'll still have your voice and you'll still be involved.
No, I won't turn into a mountain man, I promise.
Come back with a beard.
With a beard and, look like the Unabomber or something. No, I will still be involved with the Big I. I'll still be involved in the industry. And I'm looking forward to being engaged in a slightly different way, but still in a meaningful way for our carrier partners and for the independent agency system. So it's going to be an exciting new venture for me, and everybody will know where I am if they need me.
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting too. I'm curious about the it'll be different for you, but I think maybe that difference will be even better in terms of, how you'll be able to use your voice in some of those conversations and influence certain things.
Yep.
I'm sure that being the CEO of the Big I comes with a lot of strength and a lot of, benefits, but at the same time, there are probably limiting factors as well that, you have to navigate. And not to say that you shouldn't navigate those things, outside of the organization, but maybe that opens up some doors for you too, to be to have that different voice in some of those conversations, which is exciting too. For you to go through that transition. I'll be curious to see how things go, and honestly, would love to have you back on the podcast to hear how, the impact that you're continuing to make.
Oh, I would love that. And you're right. I mean, in any leadership position, it doesn't matter whether you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or running a trade association, there are constraints on freedom of speech. It's the nature of the beast in any leadership position, whether you're an NFL coach or whatever. I mean, there are constraints. Once you're not in those positions, you have a little more freedom.
Yep, exactly. Well, let me quick ask, and if you don't want to speak to this, that's absolutely okay, because I would love to have Charles on as well at some point.
Sure.
But have you all talked about his vision for the Big I and some of the things that he really wants to focus on as he takes over this position and really steps into leading the vision of the Big I?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to speak for Charles. I mean, that's a good question to ask him, but the short answer is yes. We have talked a lot about it. This transition, Charles and I and my executive committee have been talking about this for a couple of years now. Charles is ready to take the reins on September 1 of this year. And the reason I'm staying on as a consultant is to help Charles and the Big I leadership team as he goes forward and in ways that I can help. But I think you should have Charles on after he's CEO and talk to him about his vision for the Big I and the next 10 or 15 years. And I'd like to listen to that one.
I'll clip that 10 seconds out and just send him that in an email. So wonderful. I'll look forward to having him on. I'm really excited to hear where things are headed. So Bob, thank you so much. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you carving out the time. I know you're traveling this week. And you were on meetings all morning, so I'm sure there's a lot on your plate as you close things up and transition. So thank you for taking the time, and we really appreciate your service to the industry, everything you've done, and honestly, I'm excited to see where things go for you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sid. You're one of my favorites and a star, and Vertifor is fortunate to have you.
Appreciate that.
Take care.
All right. If you haven't yet been to Austin, Texas, between May 7th to the 10th, consider this your official invitation. Accelerate is the largest gathering of Vertifor users from around the country. And no matter if you're looking to be challenged by hearing the stories of successful owners who did things a bit differently, see cutting-edge solutions thanks to the implosion of the InsurTech ecosystem, or learn how you can maximize your current Vertifor tech stack, Accelerate has it all. So go to accelerate.netview.org, put it in your phone, put it in your computer, wherever you are, accelerate.netview.org, grab your ticket, and join us in the live music capital.